Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. Today we're going to go into the third part of climate change and its effect on China and the limits it places on Chinese power. And today we're going to talk in this third part about the geopolitical implications of climate change in Tibet. Uh, we've done two parts earlier. The first part and the second part I did day before yesterday and the day before that. I would suggest see both of them, and then you'll get a holistic idea of uh, what China is going to go through, and that's the way to go about it. Of course, you could see this as a standalone part. It's good, but then that's the way it is. And I'll put the links to both these in the description of this video. In fact, the description of all three, the links of all three videos will be available in all three descriptions. Okay. Now, what we did in the earlier two episodes was we went through the past 4 years, what happened in China. 2020, there was a huge flooding. 2022, there's a drought. There's this unviable or seemingly unviable south-north water transfer looming on the horizon. 23 and 24, early this year, we've had flooding, coastal typhoons, and tidal waves. And with this, it came in the problems of food security, desertification, and deforestation. All these have been highlighted and brought to the fore just in the past 4 years. The Yellow River, which is the sorrow of China, continues to spread its sorrow. In the meantime, in the past 2 years, 1 year actually, uh, the subsidence of Chinese cities, that is sinking, slow sinking of Chinese cities, has come to the fore. And the sponge cities, which were built with sponge capabilities, have failed. River pollution is almost at an all-time high, with no mitigation. The gross domestic risk of China, as evaluated by XDI, which is a Sydney-based firm, is at an all-time high. It's at the highest of all countries. If this continues, decline of China is almost certain. In fact, in my opinion, it is certain. But then let's take it forward. Today we're going to see about Tibet. Right? Many people will say, what's so great about Tibet? Climate, security, all that. No. Security, climate change, disaster, all these have a seminal connect between them. And for this, there was this recent Chanakya defense dialogues conducted by Claus, in which one theme was climate change, environment, and security. The best way anyone could explain about this connect was by General Hasnain, and I'll just replay that video for the benefit of all of you. For those of you who don't want to see the first video, this is the connect.
And I was horrified to see what had happened in Sikkim on the 4th of October last year. Most people have forgotten it. The world forgot it simply because 3 days later, the 7th of October, the Hamas did an even bigger disaster by killing 1,200 people and taking away 250 hostages. And so the whole world's attention went to that. And no one bothered about what happened in Sikkim. A glacial lake had outburst. It's just called a glacial lake outburst flood, GLOF, which had burst. Just one of the effects of that was that 3,000 tons of ammunition of the Indian Army had flown down the Teesta. 3,000 tons. That's 1,000 3-ton loads. No one knows this. Hardly anyone knows about it. So that got us thinking into that. My God, this is the kind of effect which can there on national security directly affect the capability of the Indian Army itself. The second connect in my mind I make between disasters and national security. These are three examples. Look at Somalia. What happened in Somalia? A drought, thereafter a famine, happened in the early 70s, late middle 70s. By 1993, you had the United Nations UNISOM, which was in Somalia. That was the beginning of piracy in the Red Sea. That was the beginning of terrorism, the Al-Shabaab, in all those areas of East Africa. All started from Somalia. Second example, go to Bangladesh. When we talk about migration into India, where does the route lie? It lies back in 1971, when almost 540,000 people died in that super cycle, which actually accelerated the entire process of the formation of Bangladesh, the declaration of independence, if you go into the history of Bangladesh. And it led to huge migrations thereafter. The next time it happened in 1991, another super cyclone. 140,000 people died in that particular cycle. And why go any way further? Come to Pakistan. In the year 2022, 2023, one of the biggest floods in the Indus River rendered 2.6 million people homeless. The World Bank and the IMF put together felt Pakistan would require $16 billion to resettle them. Pakistan has got $16 billion. It's going 24th time to the IMF for $3 billion. Where are they going to resettle 2.6 million people? Cast your minds back then. 3 million people came out of the Afghan crisis in 1981. The formation of the Taliban is linked to 1981. That is where the Saudi clergy came and converted everyone to radical Islam. This is the connection between disaster and security. And I was...
Yeah. Having seen that and having heard the connect between disaster and security, I think let's move ahead and see what are the markers of climate change in Tibet. You'll be surprised to know the Tibetan plateau has warmed at twice the rate of global averages. There has been a peak of 46 degrees centigrade recorded in the northern part of Tibet. Higher temperatures, retreating snow lines, shrinking glaciers, lake expansion, increasing runoffs, hydrological changes, degradation of grasslands, and worsening desertification are now distinctly noticeable. I'll show you some of these effects as we go along. It is said, or rather estimated through various studies, that glaciers have sunk by 18%, and the number and sizes of lakes has increased between 1950 and 2014. That is to say, existing lakes have expanded and new lakes have come up. In the northern part of the Tibetan plateau, the lakes will increase manifold. The central and the northern part of the plateau are the worst affected. Not the southern part, not the Himalayas, but it's not far away. The southern part is affected in a different manner. That's not climate change, it's man-made change. We'll come to that also. Overall, it is not my estimate. It is the estimate of global scientists and Chinese scientists who say that the hydrology of the plateau has become imbalanced or unbalanced, as Chinese put it. And this will affect water flow in all rivers emanating from Tibet, which means the Yangtze and Yellow River are going to be affected with whatever happens in Tibet. So there's a seminal connect. And remember, China is trying to siphon away water from Sangpo to its arid north. No, that's a different story. I will explain to you as we go along what China is doing and what it's up to and where this whole story is heading. Okay, now this lady is Mrs. Elizabeth Trickeld. She's a senior fellow at Stimson Center. She also spoke in the Chanakya Defense Dialogues. And she spoke something about the Himalayan belt and certain aspects of the Tibetan plateau. Listen to what she has to say.
In 1959, there were 7,300 kilometers of roads in the Tibetan Autonomous Region. In 2022, there were 120,000 kilometers, a massive increase. As we all know, China has committed to build 624 new border settlements. And I think beyond just the villages themselves, it's the infrastructure that it takes to power them, to connect them. So that's a massive project. We've seen new rail links, right? Linking Qinghai province to Lhasa. That is necessary for that, but also can facilitate the rapid movement of troops. And also a focus on last mile connectivity, including building out heavy lift capacity. China right now enjoys an advantage in terms of cold weather gear and the infrastructure that's built up to facilitate its troops. So as the climate warms, perhaps that advantage becomes a little bit less significant, and India will be able to catch up to an extent if this is a slightly less extreme operating environment, though obviously with the altitude, it's still going to be very challenging. With that warming, we look at permafrost. So obviously much of the higher level elevations and colder areas are currently permafrost, right? We don't see thawing of the soil. Research done at the Tibetan plateau, so specifically this is the China side, by 2050, there are likely to be percentages on the order of 38 to 39% of the existing roads, rail, and power lines, and 21% of buildings will be threatened due to permafrost loss. The thawing essentially of the soil in those areas. That again is on the.
Yeah, she's made two significant points on this. The first point is that as the temperature warms, right, the infrastructure differential between India and Tibet will start decreasing. And second point is of permafrost. Now, that permafrost is something which everyone talks, but very few people understand what permafrost is. And I will try and explain what this story is all about. Right. Now, I studied a lot, and then I got hold of a study, right, called Permafrost Degradation Increases Risk and Large Future Costs of Infrastructure on the Third Pole. And this is the link, nature.com, in articles. This article is available in other links also. Significantly, it has been done by mostly Chinese. That's why I put the author's name list also in the second line. When was it done? 13 October 22. We're talking about a year and a half back, 2 years precisely. Significant, more significant, is Chinese infrastructure expansion plans have not taken into consideration the permafrost degradation so far. This is a predominantly Chinese study, and they say that. And the complete infrastructure in Tibet is yet to adapt to climate change. This is interesting. And this set me thinking. I studied more, but I'm not going to quote all of them, but all of them talk on the same lines. Okay, what is permafrost? You see this picture? You see this yellow part? That is permafrost. That is ice under the soil. You could have active layer on top, which is the brown part. This you could have normal or lake or whatever it is, but this yellow part is what is permafrost, which is under the soil. Now, this permafrost could be in discontinued portion just about 10 meters to the depth. It could go up to about 50 meters with close talc. Talc is mud basically, with pockets of mud in between. But huge chunks of permafrost, or it could go up to 400 meters. No one knows. And there is no estimate of permafrost in Tibet. We know it's there. Everyone knows it's there, but no one knows how much. Okay. It's on this permafrost. 9,389 kilometers of roads, 580 kilometers of railways, 2,631 kilometers of power lines, and 1,64,590 square meters of buildings are located in the Qinghai Tibet plateau permafrost area. They're standing on permafrost. And as the Tibetan plateau heats up, this permafrost is going to melt, and we don't know what's going to happen. When it will melt, we don't know. How it will melt, we don't know. But this is there on permafrost. Okay. Now, you'll understand, yaar, ye permafrost hota kya hai? See this clip. And this clip is not of Tibet. This clip is of Alaska. Initially, you will find it a little difficult to hear, but you will hear eventually if you pay attention to this whole thing. Okay? I'll just make it full and listen to this.
Project where we're looking at the interactions between wildfire and permafrost thaw. Now, this site burned a really long time ago, more than 100 years ago, but we still have these thaw features present at this site. It tells us that permafrost undergoes these cycles of thaw and recovery over many thousands of years, and that's exactly what we want to study. But I want to talk about this really sharp transition. I'm standing up on a peat plateau. I am raised up in elevation because the permafrost has a lot of ice in it, and it expands the whole ground surface. It's the end of the season. We're in late September. We're going to take a true permafrost measurement right on the edge of this permafrost plateau. And that permafrost is right there. I just hit it with a thud. You can feel the ice, and it is this deep, 10, 20, 30, 40, about 47 centimeters beneath the ground surface is the permafrost. I'm going to walk over 1 meter down into this thermokarst feature and show you what a difference that topography and vegetation makes. So I'm just now in the edge of the thermokarst feature. Again, this happens when permafrost thaws. And now I'm looking for permafrost with the same instrument. And I can bury my probe. So in a very short distance, we have a really profound influence of surface elevation and vegetation on what lies beneath this ecosystem, the backbone of northern ecosystems, which is frozen ground or permafrost. Thanks. See you guys later.
So you saw that. What a difference. At one place, just 1 meter, half a meter down below, she hits rock hard ice. 1 meter away, it's all gone. Right? So that's the kind of thing with what is permafrost. Many people don't understand. It is thick ice down below. Now let's look at permafrost, how it reduces life, residual life. There's a table in that study. I'll enlarge it, have a look at it. Okay. When you look at it carefully, depending on the hazard level, which is the left column, which is high, medium, and low, reduction of useful life is put out. If the hazard level is high, if you don't adapt, 40% of residual life goes down. Or rather, reduction of useful life. If the useful life is 100 years, it's gone down to 60. If you adapt, it's 20%. I'll not talk of with adaptation because so far the Chinese have not adapted. So after all, that report is only of October 22 and nothing has been done about it. So it's all without adaptation. In a medium way or a medium hazard scale, it is 25%. Low is 15%. And the general consensus is that we are already in medium level of hazard in Tibet, or maybe more. Okay. And why more? I'll just come to it. Right? And complete infrastructure in Tibet doesn't have any adaptation to permafrost or other degradation and climate change effect. Okay. This is the distribution of infrastructure hazard. The zones. They put it out for Tibet in this report. Okay. And if you see, the central Tibet is where the red part, and the northern Tibet is where maximum, medium to high and hot spots are there. And it is through this that the roads pass. And of course, you see this part of the road, look here, all hot spots. All hot spots. This is the G219. G219 is in a hot spot. And this is that road through Aksai Chin. This part. This is Aksai Chin. This is the Chinese map. Remember that. Okay. So, all in hotspot. This is Lhasa. Right. So, all this area is in the hazard area. So, that's the next part. Okay. We all know the Qinghai Tibet Railway. 580 kilometers is in permafrost. Okay. And what about the permafrost in Tibet? As per that report, permafrost in Tibet is warmer than the high Arctic. And 40% of the permafrost in the area is considered to be especially warm and unstable. So Tibet has got the worst kind of permafrost, unstable. And the warming rate of QTP has been twice the global average. Now this report says, and this is a report by Chinese, mind you, they are unclear how much infrastructure on the QTP will be vulnerable to permafrost degradation in the future. They don't know. They don't have a clue. Okay. Right. Now this is the Zinning to Gormo to Lhasa road. The railway, QTP railway, the green part is in Tibet or in the hazard zones. Tomorrow they're going to extend it. This extension program is on. We've discussed another thing. Shigat, they want Shigat se tak to leke aaye already. They already brought it up to Shigat se, another 100 odd kilometers. They're trying to get it to Kathmandu. They're going to take it to Yecheng, all along your G219, all hazard road. And then they want to take it to Sichuan also. So the Chinese are building still. Okay. I don't know whether they take this permafrost degradation seriously or not, but we'll just have a look at it. Now, let's look at the Qinghai Tibet Highway. 9,389 kilometers of roads in Tibet. Out of the 1,20,000 which that lady, Mrs. Elizabeth Freckle said, is in permafrost. And maybe more as they build, because they're still building. When they want to solidify the villages, they have to build roads, and they will go over permafrost in many places. Okay, so now this is it. Long-term observation data for the Qinghai-Tibet highway over the past 60 years show that the lifespan of the road may be reduced by more than 50% in high hazard areas. So this road is going to get disrupted sooner than later. That's on the cards. So then what? The next question is, what if it happens? Now this is a road. Okay. Now you'll think this is something funny, but I'll explain to you what these pillars are on the right and left of the road just shortly after this slide. Next. Okay. Now 60% of the current infrastructure in the permafrost area will be exposed in the high hazard zone. And an additional cost of 6.31 billion will be needed just for this. Okay. Forget about what they're spending on new infrastructure. Now, to offset this, they have to do roadbed cooling engineering measures such as shading boards, ventilation ducts, thermosiphons, air-cooled and crushed rock embankments to protect the infrastructure to some extent. Even then, there's no surety. And loss of foundation bearing capacity and ground subsidence is inevitable, and this is already happening both on the QTR, that is the Qinghai Tibet Railway, and the highway. Subsidence is sinking of the road. There have been reports that the railway line was closed at times for repair, but actually it's for this problems. Now, there is an uncertainty in the whole story, which means the cost increases, and technology development makes it impossible to plan engineering adaptation measures. They don't know how to make it. As of now, there's no solution. People are just, these initial reports are coming up. Serious reports as to what's happening in the Tibet plateau. What's happening in the Tibet plateau, people are seeing, but how to mitigate away from it, people are not looking at it. Okay. Now, look at this clip. It's a very interesting clip, and pay close attention to what this clip says. Look at the cost of this rod. This looks like a rod, isn't it? Like an antenna. It costs $27,000. And this is the thermosiphon which has been put on Qinghai Tibet roadway or highway, also on the railway. You'll understand this. Have a
This
look.
is the most expensive iron rod in the world. Each one costs $27,000. China has planted 15,000 of these along their Highland Railway. Why is that? This iron rod is called a thermal rod. The soil on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau is permafrost. It has accumulated over many years and is widely distributed. In summer, when the temperature rises, the permafrost melts, turning the foundation into a slurry. The rails get twisted and deformed. In a few years, they would be unusable. Trains running through would face immense danger. So keeping the soil frozen from winter onwards perfectly solves this problem. The thermal rod is buried 5 meters underground, with 2 meters exposed above ground. In winter, the ammonia inside the underground pipe evaporates into a gas, rises to the top of the pipe, and is cooled by the cold wind, removing excess heat. The ammonia gas then freezes back into a liquid, flowing back down the pipe to repeat the cycle, cooling the ground. Its one-way thermal conductivity ensures that the rod does not absorb heat from the air in summer, preventing the soil from thawing. Thus, the permafrost remains frozen year-round, maintaining the stability of the railway on the plateau. This is the most expensive
Right. Now, as the plateau heats up, this system will become more costly. As the plateau heats up, the system will have to be upgraded to a different system, which means even more cost. as the plateau heats up, it is possible that system might not work, because this works on the principle that the rod which is over the ground is cooled by air there. If there is hot air around, how do you think this will get cooled? This ammonia won't freeze. If the ammonia doesn't freeze, it cannot keep the permafrost underneath frozen. So far the permafrost has been kept artificially frozen by these thermosiphons. It's some kind of an open air conditioning system along the road, and that's failing. Okay, the point is, can China afford it? Yeah, why not? China can afford everything, isn't it? But what happens to its economy? As the economy grows down, its affordability goes up. Or rather, in fact, the cost goes up and the affordability goes down. And how much can China afford? This is just one facet. We'll see ahead. It's interesting. You'll see this a very interesting thing. Now, there's a huge Qinghai Tibet DC power transmission line, because electricity comes from the mainland. And there are 2,631 kilometers of power line in permafrost. Incidentally, the QTR, the Qinghai Tibet Highway, and the DC power line are the maximum climate change changers of this area. They contribute to heating of the plateau. And they heat exactly the places on which they run. Electricity, it's running through power lines, it's going to heat up everything. So this is there. Actually, the infrastructure in Tibet is force multiplying the climate change at a rapid rate. Okay, add to this the dams. I told you, I'll come to the dams. The dams are a different story. Okay. Now, these are some kind of dams which these chaps are building. Now, that's not the point. Look at this. This is the number of dams on the Shankar. Now, there are about 14, 15 dams, and they're all major dams. Now, what happens when you build these dams? When you build the dams, there is water which collects upstream of the dam. And the Shankar Gorge itself is the reservoir. So you might have a dam, 50, 60 kilometers upstream of that might be the water which is held or stored. Now, what happens in that gorge? 50 kilometers of water stored over 100 meters, because these dams are big. They built big dams. I mean, I don't have the technical thing for each, but for example, the one on this is the Big Bend, this is the one. This is the Big Bend, on Triangpo, which Medoc County, with their building. This is supposed to be nearly 200 meters tall. So 200 meters tall, 60, 70 kilometers behind that, water will stagnate, or rather pondage will be created. Now that water has weight. That weight will seep through the cracks below. Himalayas are young mountains. They'll cross fracture of rocks below, and below that, and earthquakes will come. And this is something which China has experienced already in Sichuan. If you look into the Sichuan earthquake, which is of 2008, I think, I don't remember the date, right? This is exactly the reason. Somewhere there was a lake which they had artificially created in some hills. That seeped through water, broke subterranean rocks, and then there was an earthquake, and they had casualties of up to 50,000 people. Think what will happen here. If this goes, their complete infrastructure, and mind you, they're building along the Sangpo, the railway track, and there's a Eastern Express highway. So there are dams, there is transmission lines, there is a railway track being built, and there are new roads being made, and they're trying to tap water from these dams to go down to the plains. They're doing a lot of engineering there, and they're disturbing the whole ecology as fast as they can, as the Chinese can, and no one else can. The impact of this we don't know. The communist Raj hai, karte jao. Xi Jinping has given hukum, so it's being done. As simple as that. Okay, am I being, too harsh on this whole system? No. Watch. Aage hai kahani. So this is the Himalayan earthquakes which have happened on this zone. This is the most earthquake-prone zone along the Himalayas, and these chaps are doing just north of that. Problem is, we might also suffer some earthquakes because of this, because the earthquakes need not happen just on the Sangpo. It could happen north or to the south. But hopefully it will happen to the north, the way I look at it, because that's where they're improving the roads. That's where they're disturbing, that they're tunneling to take water down to their plains. And that's where they're trying to, disturb the whole area by building railway tracks. So in these areas, if you have to do that, you have to blast your way through. So if you have to blast your way through and there's water doing the help, so you might land up in an earthquake sooner or later. And that is something, look, earthquake there in China controlled territory, I couldn't get a damn, but I need to make use of it. Am I making use of it is a question which I'm going to ask at the end. Incidentally, for those of you who don't understand this is something which happened in a place called Choglamsar in Leh 3-4 years back. There were unseasonal rains. There was landslide and mudslide. The whole town got blocked off. A lot of people died. Even this can happen in Tibet. This happens because if you collect water bodies where there's no standing water, you collect running water there. Running water is warm. It doesn't freeze. It will get evaporated with the rise in temperature. There'll be local rains. Local rains will lead to this. That's what happened in Leh. So let's watch out for that. Our intelligence has to start thinking of all this. Okay, now look at, I earlier said lake expansion. Look at this lake. This is the lake. Okay, I'll open up the slide. You don't need to see my face. Have a look at this. This is the lake originally. This was in 1984. Look at it now. It's about 10 times the size. This is not one lake. Here, there's another one. This is 94 ka lake. You can go and Google with these names. Dogai Koring Lake, wherever it is. See how big it has become in 2006. And now I don't know what the size is. And right? And today I don't know what the size is. I don't know how big the lakes are, what the current status is, but I do know that there are reports of certain parts of the road going under the lakes, submerged, and some parts of the railway, those pillars also going under lakes. And if that happens, we don't know what's happening underneath in the permafrost area. Now you think it's a joke. Look at the CPEC. I must highlight this. Look at the CPEC. Everyone said, oh, people from Xinjiang will come through Kunjareb Pass, come through CPEC, and coal will come from there, and oil will go up. What has happened so far? Nothing has gone. Why? The road from Kunjareb Pass down in Gilgit-Baltistan has collapsed so many times that they can do nothing. पिक्चर्स में तो अच्छा लगते हैं, फर्स्ट क्लास रोड्स, 4 lane वगैरह वगैरह, but most of the time it has been closed, not fit for heavy traffic. Soon it will happen in Tibet with the kind of things which are happening, right? So this is not the only one. Like I said, look at this. This is another lake, and you look at the how big it has become. This is one, and again you'll see there are 3 distinct parts of this lake, or rather there are 3 small lakes, right? Now, what are they? It looks like one big lake. This is the kind of lake expansion which is happening. Okay, does it finish here? You'll see this. This is a very, very deadly video. Must see. See it in, and this video is from South China Morning Post, and this shows the permafrost melt effect. When permafrost melts underneath, what happens? This is one effect which was actually seen on ground. Have a look. You think this is a volcano? No, this is permafrost field. There is not one small line. It's a huge forest somewhere down below, melting and moving. It's like an underground river which has melted like a glacier, and it's moving down. And with it, it's bringing the whole hillside down. And this is the reality. I don't know when it happened. It happened a couple of years back. And as the Tibetan plateau keeps warming up, this effect will increase. Okay. Now, this is what Mrs. Trekkel, she said, she quoted some figures. This is the table. This is the threat of permafrost degradation by 2050. Roads, power lines, railways, and buildings. Minimum is around 19%. High is around 60%. Likely is the likely is something which I put in between. It is not there. It could be around 30 to 40%. If this happens, and if this gets accelerated, because the acceleration factor is not something which has been put in by these researchers. They did the study as they got the data of that day, 22. They don't know Xi Jinping's mind, na? Kya hone wala hai aage. We don't know what will happen if there's an earthquake or there's a flood or something which can happen. And then what General Hasnain said, one day in the glacial outburst, 3,000 tons of ammunition of Indian Army went down Tista. So much more might go. So you might one day start fishing in Sangpo and fish Chinese ammunition. We don't know. All these are on cards. Look at the cost. The Alaska public infrastructure, they said the cost will be 1.6 billion because they've been monitoring it and they have a scientific way of going about it. Russia also has a lot of permafrost along Siberia. Complete Siberia is full of permafrost. There, the expenditure could be as high as $34 billion. Now, these estimates are lacking in the Tibetan plateau. And this is the largest permafrost region in the middle and low altitudes of the world. And this is warm permafrost. And this is going to happen. So he says, this report finally putting all figures either, it says substantial increase in cost due to the damaged infrastructure that needs to be repaired. probably relocated or completely replaced to maintain its service function. This is going to happen. Will it happen in the next 5 years? I don't know. Will it happen in the next 10 years? I don't know. 2050 is a marker. It could happen before. Well before. And this could happen when Chinese demography is going down, their economy is going down, and climate change is hitting China also. Don't forget that. The Qinghai Tibet Railway, the highway, and the DC power line are major contributors to the climate change effect. And these will all be at risk. The QTR has already been put at risk due to lake water expansion and some water submergence, which we don't know. I mean, some reports have come, but definitely they'll not give you everything. Now, submergence and permafrost thawing will adversely affect roads and other infrastructure. This is a certainty. It's certain as to how much of Chinese infrastructure will be affected. But what is clear is as time increases, the effect will also increase. The risk factor is not being mitigated so far. That's what I've said. Increasing infrastructure, infrastructure is at increasing risk, which cannot be mitigated since the Chinese economy is no more that strong. When the economy was strong, they built all this. My estimate is in about 5 to 10 years, this is my personal view, 5 to 10 years, we're looking at about 2030 to 2035, the infrastructure degradation will be felt. So when we say China will build this road, that infrastructure, all these have question marks. Overall, Chinese capacities will go down because those thermosiphons will stop functioning beyond a point. Already, there are studies to suggest that those thermosiphons need relook. And they don't have an answer so far. Like I said, you have to combine it with the climate change in China, where we've spoken at the beginning of unseasonal floods, droughts, tropical storms, climate events, which are affecting China as never before. So if you want to get a holistic picture, I again request you people, go back to the earlier videos. See now all 3 videos in together. Those of you who are serious about what I'm talking. Now, damage to China due to climate change, or rather Tibet, in Tibet, in fact, in Tibet and in China, will only be more costly as days go by. There's pollution, there's so many things which are there, happening there. Will Xi Jinping spend money there or here? My view, I don't have, this is my empirical or rather wild view, is the economics of infrastructure replacement will be beyond China. Someone needs to look into it seriously. I hope after this, someone will sit down, put their thinking hats together, put together a team, an interministerial team is required for this, not me alone, and then we'll have a look at it. Why? There's a military effect. If the infrastructure in Tibet goes down, or tomorrow if there's an earthquake and some infrastructure goes off, there are opportunities which open up. Would you like to make use of it or not? When we were busy with the Pakistanis in Kargil, the Chinese built roads. Is there opportunity coming up at that point of time? What is the sociological effect on Tibetans who are there? If the infrastructure goes, Tibet, and if China's decline happens the way it is, Tibetans should seriously start looking at putting their flag up repeated this many times. Whenever the central authority in China was strong, Tibetans were under the Chinese yoke. When China was weak, Tibetan independence flag was up. Is that going to happen now? Is the issue. It's something which Tibetans have to take care of, and it is something India also has to be cognizant of. Then what about the demography? The demographic effect on China. Because when we study the demography, you'll know China is already in a problem. It's already in a problem, and I'll prove it. In 5 years, the problem will be pretty bad. What about geopolitical tensions? And this entire business of climate change in China or Tibet is not a standalone effect. You have to see it in a matrix. Is there anyone seeing it in India? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm trying to. And I'll get people, a lot of people saying, oh, and Chinese will troll me also because they've been trolling, Of course, that doesn't stop me from doing what I am supposed to do, but the trolling will start sooner or later. In fact, sooner than later. Okay. So I thought I'll put all these things across to you.